Welcome back. Another episode of RX Radio. Calum, Raistrick, team pro coach. It's been a long time in the works. Just being able to pin Calum down for an hour and a half must have been tough. We arranged the podcast to be recorded like a week before, and I sent him the invite, and there's issues with the recording software we're using, and he was like just being so polite, thought that I had something else going on, and in my mind I thought maybe Calum is taking a nap. And I'm not going to bug him. And I reach out a week later. I was like, hey, man, like, you want to run it back? And he goes, oh, dude, I was like waiting for you. We're just in complete opposite rooms. And, Calum and I have crossed paths a handful of times. He's coached some of my closest friends in the world who also now work with him. And Calum's become a good friend and someone definitely admired in the industry with what he's doing. His ability to work in and on a business at his level is really second to none. A lot of great takeaways. You're a coach looking into getting into competition prep. You're a coach looking to grow your business. You're a coach looking to do both. Calum Raistrick is one of one when it comes to prep coaching and business building. A lot of great insights around both. So do enjoy the episode. If you guys are following Calum on Instagram, Calum Raistrick, team pro coach. Just unbelievable track record of athletes. He's winning pro cards at a rate faster than any coach that I'm aware of. So yeah, really great episode. Fingers crossed we can actually get Calum out to the Prescript Level 1 in Dubai. That will be going live December 1, 2, and 3. Tickets are up for sale now. We're going to be doing it at the Dungeon Power Building Gym in Dubai. If you are in attendance for this course, you are automatically enrolled into the 2024 first semester of the L1 online. You get access to the Prescript Collective, 96 hours worth of lab time face-to-face with our instructors, teasing through all the questions as well, getting plugged into our network of coaches worldwide. You get the Prescript Level 1 manual. You get access to the Prescript Collective. That's going to be going live. If you're in Europe or you're not in Europe, I was just saying it's not a bad place to be. Kind of someone who lived in Dubai, I'm very excited to be back, especially in December. It's a great time of year to visit. So registration Prescript Level 1 Dubai, December 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. The unique format for us, a 3-day event. We're all going to just be hanging out, training after every day. So if you guys are interested in taking the online course and want to get hands-on, feel free to register now, pre-script.com. If not, guys, do enjoy the episode. Calum Raistrick, team pro coach. We'll see you guys next episode. Let me hit it. Difficult to have hobbies outside of bodybuilding?
Yes.
What are the hobbies if they exist?
Outside of the day-to-day. I tried to pick up golf. There's a driving range near our house, which is we've been a couple of times, and I used to play when I was a kid with my granddad, so I'm familiar with it. But it's just I've yet to make it onto an actual course. It's just been a driving range, and then there'll be 3 weeks where I don't go, and then I'll go again. So it's there's something like just if you get like 100 balls and you're just like, right, it's an hour of time where you're not on your phone or you're not on whatever, you're disconnected, which is there's something refreshing about that. But yeah, once the season's done, the next couple of months, like from December, I think the last show is on the first week of December, and then there's like a 3-month gap between December and March. Like that's where I'll try and detach a little bit more.
Now, is any part of the catharsis of golf the fact that you get to smash something with a implement?
Yeah. Yeah, it helps. It definitely helps.
I just couldn't imagine, like, your job must be so ripe with frustrations as like a prep coach at your level, and in a sport like bodybuilding. Like I remember I grabbed my partner aside the other day and I was like, there's Canadian nationals going on, as I'm sure you know, as I'm sure you probably had athletes in the pro coach organization competing. And I remember going, like Canada in the bodybuilding scene has been emergent in the past. We've always had like one or two guys, like the Paul Dillette era lend way to like maybe like the BPAC era in a bit. And then into, now there's an emergence, Valier and obviously CBum and the Hamilton, what they've done with Pure Muscle and Fitness.
And it's like, this is one of the largest, most developed countries in the world in a sport that's, it's niche, it's fringe, but it's nationals, which is like a big deal in the world. And I remember like the warm
Yeah.
up room, there were guys doing push-ups on a lucite table. And I'm like, hold on a second. What? You must be pulling your mustache out when you get to some of these warm-up rooms, and like in a sport that is so dependent on controlling variables, and your job hinges on that. How frustrating is your job?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, to be fair, like it's getting better, but like across the board in the grand scheme of things, the organization on the day that counts in terms of the shows being run, like you'll go to probably 75% of shows where it's just complete chaos, and then some hosts and federations do it really, really well. But most of them, it's just complete carnage once you get there.
Well, because you also have an interesting vantage point of bodybuilding too, where it's, yes, as the sport has expanded, there's more resources available in the sport. However, the sport expands into markets with less resources. Tunisia, to name what country.
Yeah.
That you probably don't ever need to go to. I've been. People are like, why? My answer, I have no idea. Would I go back? Not in a rush.
Yeah.
The Tunisian bodybuilding show, Hader, good friend, and team pro prep coach, Hader Mendy, and Oscar Young, if I'm not mistaken, both competed in Tunisia.
Yep.
Walk me through that nightmare.
That was probably the most rough and ready we've had so far. It was an experience, to be fair. Like Tunisia was something that it was like stepping off the plane and getting into a taxi, and you're 15 minutes down the road, and it's like you're on a different planet because it's so different to what we're familiar with in terms of traveling. If it's like US or Europe. But the contrast is like the people were very, very welcoming, and the people were really, really helpful. But the actual like resources and just the landscape and the environment that you're in is like dressed like you go out your Airbnb and there's like a desolate wasteland in front of your Airbnb, and then there's just stray dogs everywhere. And Hannah's just there taking pictures of these stray dogs. Like, oh, can we bring one home? It's like probably not, unless you've got 9 tetanus jabs in your bag with you. But yeah, the Tunisia show backstage was definitely one that you could document as part of a Netflix series. I think in terms of the drama backstage in that show.
Do experiences like that? I mean, certainly they must like fortify your calm, cool, and collected demeanor, because when you're in, I don't know, Birmingham or something, it's like, well, I go out my back door, there's the Cadbury chocolate factory. Like there's things that go bad in Europe or in North American shows are not relatively that bad to the things that are going to go bad in Tunisia.
Yeah, like that's the thing. Like once you've done that and you've taken athletes to stage in that environment, then everything else is just like, well, whatever comes because you're kind of prepared for anything at that point. And also the same for an athlete. Like if you're in a position where you've gone to those lengths and competed at something like that, then although it is, the show itself was well run, the environment you're in is suboptimal relative to what you used to. But once you've done it once, like you'll go to Europe or you'll go to the US, and then that becomes easy. Then like you're not nervous, you're not anxious about, oh, what am I going to have this? Am I going to have that? Like all those other experiences to come get a little bit easier once you've gone through the more challenging route to stage, if that makes sense.
Now, when it comes to like a client looking to take on a prep, I want to go on this route to say, let's run this for me. What if I were to knock on your door one day and be like, Cal, right, I've been thinking a lot about this. I want to get on stage, me personally, as I am right now, in all my glory, with all my broken pieces. What is the process in taking someone from, pre-contemplation, contemplation to action to stage?
I think our process in terms of like if an inquiry comes on, the way you'll approach that is twofolded in regards to whether they are a previous competitor, whether they've stepped on stage before, or whether it's someone that is just like a fitness enthusiast. And someone for like even take for example yourself, like you've got a lot of areas of discipline and skill and expertise in things that are transferable. So like I know if you came to me, right, he's already got a very high level of awareness over training, mechanics, movement, programming. Like he understands recovery very well. He knows nutrition very well. So from your perspective, it's actually an easier transition than a lot of people would think. Well, it's a different sport, but like you hold a lot of muscle mass. You've trained at a very high level before. You're very strong. Whereas if you get someone that comes to you and it's like they're a fitness enthusiast, they've never competed, they don't have a lot of lean tissue, like they've never really been in close proximity to condition or any lower level of body fat, like that is something that you can't go from blank slate to stage in one go. Like you've got to make foundations there before you even think about competing. And the people that don't and try and jump those stages end up either not making it to stage in a prep or making it to stage and thinking, I'm never doing that again, because they just haven't earned the right to do it in the first place. Like if you look at someone like take Oscar or Hayder, for example, like they've competed for, near enough a decade, each of them. And the first time they would have stepped on stage, they wouldn't have had the knowledge and the awareness that they have now in terms of application, and that gets better over time, but still they would have had the foundation over their training age would have been a high enough standard to warrant them stepping on stage in the first place in terms of how much muscle they had. And also they probably would have had some level of experience with dieting before they try and get into contest prep shape, because, you'll see this with sport as well in terms of, whether it's pressure at a high level for athletes on a higher stage or a higher platform, or whether it's performance-based pressure, like dieting and the psychological impact of the sport is just as heavy of a burden as the physical side. And you've got to get someone in a mind frame, in a state of mind where you have the confidence in their ability to execute even when things get very, very challenging. And often when you're taking someone on that's that clean slate, no exposure, no experience, you don't have that reassurance that they're able to do that when the pressure goes on. It would be like me saying, like, you worked a lot with the American footballers. Now, it would be like me saying, oh, go and throw some college athlete that's never played Division 1 into an NFL team and give him a shirt and throw him on the pitch. Like, he'd crumble under the pressure, right? It's the same with if I told somebody to go, right, you're doing 15,000 steps, an hour's cardio, and you're eating 1,600 calories for the next 12 weeks. They're going to do it for a week and then they're going to bottle it because they don't have the mental capacity to actually get themselves through it. Their body could do it, but the mind is not ready is not conditioned enough to get them over the finish line yet.
Do you have a pretty good gauge now in your experience of doing this? Like, because I'm certain there are people who are, further along, like me, for example. Like, yeah, I've been training for a long time and whatever, a decent size, but a diet for me is 3 days. If I make it to 3 days without Uber Eats and cookies to my fucking doorstep, God damn it. I'm 4 weeks out, Cal. I'm ready to go. Like, do you have ways of picking out the wheat from the chaff, so to speak? Like, can you be like, this guy's gonna crack? Do you have patterns that you recognize in clients that you take on, with the mental being such a big, if not the entire component of it?
Yeah, like that's why something I'll typically say is unless it's someone that has had experience competing at a sufficient level relative to the goal of them wherever they want to compete at in terms of federation and standard. Like if it's a new competitor, I'd want time with them to kind of nurture that coaching relationship for one, but also get an appreciation over 8, 12, 16 weeks to start with before they even start the prep of knowing what makes them tick, but also knowing where the limits are. And you can pick up on that really, really quickly, where sometimes you'll have a consult call and they'll tell you what you need to hear, but you can kind of from a coaching eye standpoint, after a while of doing it for a decade plus, you can kind of tell who's bullshitting and who's not, and who's generally holding weight to their words. And it's very quickly understood when you actually start the process. So with that, it becomes very apparent quickly enough whether they are in a position to do it successfully or not. And if they can't, then, really ethically from a coaching standpoint, it's then your job to step in and say, look, you need more time to lay some foundations before you actually do this, because we've all been there where we've taken clients and athletes through preps where we know deep down at the start, I'm not sure they're going to be able to do this. And it ends up in a complete train wreck, psychologically, hormonally, everything. So, our responsibility is to make sure they're ready to go before you even start.
Have you ever had a point in your career where, I'm sure like most coaches, when you're early starting out, you kind of work with whoever wants to work with you. Now it's, you're the single most household name when it comes to coaching in the industry. Like, the pro coach and what you've done over the last couple of years is truly unprecedented. So you probably get to pick the litter when it comes to who's working with you directly. But there must have been a time where, you were probably having these conversations internally with yourself more than you would care to and more than you have to right now. Did you ever have a point where you're like, dealing with people's nonsense is not it? Like, did you ever have a point before, the record really started to take off where you're like, I don't know if I can handle dealing with people texting me broccoli or green beans for the rest of my life?
I think you just get numb to it. Like if I'm with someone else, or even if I'm with Hannah, my wife, and I'm like sitting down doing an hour of check-ins, she'll be like, how on earth do you do that every day of the week, all day? But you just get accustomed to that just being the norm. And there is a point where it's like the higher the caliber of the athlete, the less kind of nuance there is in terms of back and forth with questions, etc. And it's more direct to the point, and that brings its own pressure because your responsibility in what's expected of you as a coach now isn't just getting them through the process and getting them on stage. It's now turning pro or winning a pro show or qualified for the Olympia or placing at the Olympia. So the pressure's on a different spectrum in that regard. But I think the start of your coaching career, you're working with people that have different level and caliber of goals, and that's where you're going to get that stuff. But once you get to where we are now, and we work really hard to get here, I think the caliber of the athlete probably gives them the ground level experience enough to not have to deal with that day to day. It's more so a case of like, right, how do we maximize this to really excel at their competitive success, and that's where the real kind of pressure is.
So I would imagine, and kind of as you mentioned, the majority of your day is spent. The check-in is the cornerstone of the business, right? I mean, other than on the day, which I kind of want to talk about further down the line, is how, because it's not like, especially in comp prep, it's not like, all right, I'll talk to you next Sunday night and I have a 12-hour window. Like, you must just be on your phone constantly, right? It has to be 24/7, I would imagine.
Yeah, so like off-season updates, so that would be like, in another sport, that would be like outside of the season. It would be like in their pre-season or in their off-season where they're just getting better and improving. In the off-season, most of the people will be on 2 updates a week, so like a Monday and a whatever. Everyone's on different days, but most of the people will be like every 3 or 4 days. Some people will be once a week if they're really set into, look, we're probably not going to need to make changes that frequently at the moment. But if it's prep, like, you can probably guarantee that at least the last 4 weeks of that process, they're talking to you every day, checking in every day. And, maybe at 8 to 12 weeks out, it would be 3 times a week or every other day. And then when you get to, the last couple of weeks, it will be every other day, several times a day, because you're having to talk to them between meals. You're having to check them in between, if they're eating 6 times or 5 times a day and they're peaking for a show, you're having to take feedback from them and look at them 5-6 times a day after their training session, when they wake up, before the second meal, before the third meal, because you're adjusting those meals relative to the look. So it's constant, it's completely constant, but that's why I spend 99% of my day on my laptop or my phone. Like, the way I do it is I'll have WhatsApp on my desktop on my laptop, so I won't actually be on my phone. I'll be doing the WhatsApp on my desktop, which I find much easier. But yeah, it's pretty much nonstop from the minute you get up.
What is the system that keeps you on the rails? Like, what's the 1% of the day that's not 99.9% check-ins that like allows you to stay on top of this without missing clients and missing check-ins and missing feedback? Like, how has your systems evolved to allow you to operate like this?
In terms of like how we structured that communication and how we're getting to people in a timely manner. You mean that?
Yeah, partly that, and partly like, dude, the mental sanity of being around you on your phone when you're traveling for all of 10 minutes. I'm like, I look out and it's a hamstring, and then it's an ab and thigh, and then it's like a bunch of calories, and I was like, dude, I'm stressing the fuck out. Cal, like, I'm eating sushi here. Like, can we? And like, how do you mentally tie it together? Like, because you can't be numb, because it's such a job that's so that lends itself to compassion and like and empathy and camaraderie.
Yeah.
So it's like numb. Like, I understand some of the tedious stuff, but like, what is your, not like a daily routine, but like, are you listening to music? Like, you obviously yourself trained. What is it that keeps you anchored? Because the world and I don't know if this is a newsflash for you, the world you work in is insane.
I think the term numb there is not like it's not like you're emotionally checked out. It's more so just the fact that I've done it like that for such a long period of time that it doesn't. There's nothing. I don't think any other way. It's like, for me, that's completely normal. Like, it's just what I do day to day. Whereas if somebody sees that from a fly on the wall perspective, they're like, that's pretty strange, in terms of like, not many people do that. But I think at that level, when you're working with that many people and you really are trying to push the envelope with what you can achieve, it's there's no other way around it. Like, it's got to be that level of communication. Like, I'll spend some time with the dogs. We'll go on a dog walk if we have the time for the day. If not, Hannah does it. I'll have an hour and a bit in the gym each day, and then in the evening, the easiest way I find to switch off is to listen to a podcast until I fall asleep. And I'll fall asleep within if I've got something in my ears, in my earpods, and I'll listen to like something non-bodybuilding related. Like, it can't be anything to do with bodybuilding. Like, when I listen to podcasts, it will be nothing to do with the sport.
Give me an example.
It will be like Theo Vaughn's podcast or Joe Rogan, probably.
That is so funny. What a call. That's just shut your brain off stuff.
And if I listen to that, then I'm sweet. Like, I completely detach and I can fall asleep straight away. But it can't be if I listen to anything bodybuilding related, my brain's just on overdrive, so I can't do it.
Well, because you've done something interesting that where I'm sitting, I don't think I've seen anyone do, and I'm going to try and dig selfishly at it. You started by building a job for yourself that is so all-encompassing of your time, as you've laid out, but somehow found the time to build a business. And only people who've done the latter know the difference between building a business and building a job for yourself. Because most coaches in the industry build a job for themselves, and they CEO of, Body by Fit thing. And it's like, do you know how that works? But you've taken, what you've done, and you've made the Pro Coach brand, which is something that exists as an entity outside of you, which is really hard to do from a founder-driven company, to have the brand of Pro Coach be something that stands on its own 2 feet. And you've done this somehow in between check-ins on WhatsApp and, do we go this show in Tunisia and Bulgaria? How, I need to know personally how the fuck you did that.
I think it's a bit when I first started in the industry and I was PTing on the gym floor. Mark Coles, don't you?
Of course.
He had M10 in Nottingham.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So I worked at M10 for 3 years, and that's where I first got exposed to the whole kind of physique coaching world. Like, I had mentors there. I spent 3 years there, and that's where I really kind of developed that skill set that's more refined over to body composition and physique stuff, and training for that matter as well in regards to that goal. And M10 was very much like a team atmosphere, and I've always come from a sporting background. Like, my dad's big on sport, my brother's big on sport, like a big rugby family. So that team environment was always something that was like really heavily ingrained into me. And when I went to M10, it was like the first time that I got experience with that kind of feel and camaraderie within a team, but with what I love to do for the coaching side. And when I left M10, we started a business called the Muscle Mentors, which was basically like the the birth child of the ideas we had at M10 with me and a guy called Luke Hoffman. And that's where we first started the education, and we took some coaches on board when we both hit capacity with coaching. We're like, right, we're going to take some coaches on board. And that ended up with, I think, 7 or 8 of us. And then they went down the education route and really specialized in exercise mechanics. And my passion was always on coaching itself. So I always wanted to build a team around me. And I think you're going to get to a point with this where it's like, I could keep taking on clients myself forever and ever and ever. But the more I take on, the more I'm bottlenecked with how much time and energy I can actually give to the clients I'm working with. And you get to a point where it starts to become a bit of a compromise. So the only way that you can scale that and expand it is by bringing people on that are like-minded, that can operate at your level, that can facilitate the demand that you're having individually. And the whole notion over pro coach was like, I didn't want to call it Raistrick bodybuilding coaching, whatever you call it. Like, I wanted it to be an entity, like you said, that could stand by itself, where like in 10 years time, I can work with a really small handful of people and I can have the coaches run and be the face of the business, where I don't have to put so much, individual time into it, in terms of like, unless Cal's doing this doesn't work. Like, it can't be like that to be sustainable.
Now, how many coaches do you have under you currently? And like, what are the, you talk about like-minded people, like that's an easy thing to find. Like you're pretty unique, especially in the coaching space. Cause the more that I've been around, I mean, I've been in the fitness industry, I don't know, in some way, shape or fashion for, 10 or 15 years. And the more you kind of get closer to the source with coaching, it's like, you're one of a few coaches I'd have on the podcast just out of ethical reasons. So the idea that you're going to find like-minded individuals, like how does that not take up your entire day?
Yeah. So like we've got 10 coaches that work within the business now. And that's split between, the prep side for bodybuilding specific. And also there's 5 of them that operate with just the kind of umbrella of a physique coach. So they'll put people through transformations, they'll do photo shoot preps, and that's like the foundation of it. And then there'll be 5 guys that, including me, that do the prep side. And 3 of those guys we pulled from the Muscle Mentor. So when I left and did pro coach, 3 of the guys came with me. That was my original coaching team. So they stayed with me and started pro coach there. So it was very familiar ground there, because I'd already worked with them for 2-3 years. And then everyone else since then has been someone that I've either individually coached or I've mentored. So like the people that I've already had like very good rapport with, that know how I operate, know the systems, know how I coach, have got an experience as the athlete of how I prep people and how I take people through different phases. They're kind of, they've been nurtured by my methodology. So they're very familiar with how I'd want them to coach at the same time, if that makes sense. That's what they know. That's what they've experienced. And I think that's probably why it works so well, because we're not just like putting on Instagram, oh, there's a job going, apply, and some random guy turns up and is like, here's my CV, can I join? It's more so people that have like been nurtured within the business and our environment already, that then become a part of the brand, which is why I think it clicks a little bit better than if it was just someone that was third party.
Because you said 10 coaches total, 5 on like the prep, 5 on the physique development just side in general.
Yeah.
How much of your day does that occupy, or how much of your week does that occupy? Like, or is it something where the vetting process is so rigid that, or it's so interpersonal that like when you make the decision, like, hey, we're going to sign this person on, that it's not something where it's like, oh God, what's Hater doing? Is Hater sending feet pics to his clients again? Like, God damn it, Hater, how many times do I have to tell you?
So like there's certain ways that we manage that. Like the communication side is really important. Like I have like an internal team manager for the team. I have like I hate the word PA, but like there's a girl that we employ called Zoe, who is like the bread and butter of the business. Like she's the glue of the business. She manages my diary. She books all the flights. She books hotels. She does everything. Like without her, I'd just be completely clueless in terms of organization. So like there are things that she takes from me in terms of responsibility that allows me to just focus on what I need to focus on. And that is like those 2 elements heavily manage the business side of things, and then we outsource some stuff for like logistical stuff for like how we manage like the inquiries and the CRM to another guy called Ben Hawksworth who manages the back end. And as part of that integral team, like that's where things like click and operate and the cog goes round, and it allows me to then just focus on coaching. It's like apart from like internal team meetings every week, and again just like general WhatsApp communication, like it runs self-sufficiently, but it only works because of those three things.
Now, it seems as if you've done all you can to free up your time to do the thing that you like doing and are good at doing, which like business 101, I guess, right? Like hire people to do the shit you don't want to do, hire people smarter than you. You talked about half of the job kind of being like, well, and not half from a time commitment standpoint, it would be the bulk of it being kind of like, not emotionally numb, but autopiloted, instinctual, well-referenced, communication. That's most of the job until all of a sudden on a single day, you meet your client somewhere in Bulgaria or Tunisia or Norway or Texas, and you go from pictures on a phone that's half the size of your giant fucking hand to like, we're in a Hilton by Marriott Garden Inn in Plano, Texas. There's 40 Oompa Loompas running around in silk robes. Everyone hasn't had a meal in a week. And then like you go from like the Cotswolds with the dogs running around your feet, answering WhatsApp messages, to the most insane lobby of a hotel that anyone has ever seen in their life. Where does what you're on a plane, you got your ticket, you got your bag, you got, the staff with you, you're headed to a big show. Where is your head at? Are you like deep breaths? Like, how do you prepare for that? It's so insane to me.
Yeah. Like it's, I think you've got so much to think about and stay on top of that you don't really take a step back and like actually take in what's going on. If that, as silly as that sounds, like it's like, for example, like the last 2 weekends, like in Bulgaria, we had 3 athletes in Bulgaria. We had 4 athletes in Italy the same day. We had 1 athlete at the Legion in Reno. We had 2 athletes in the UK. It's like I'm peaking like 9, 10, 12, sometimes more people a weekend, and they're all on different time zones. So outside of managing that, you don't really have any time to think. So like from my side, if we're traveling to Bulgaria on a flight, all I'm thinking about is staying on top of those 12 people whilst managing everyone else's check-ins that are coming through as normal for the week anyway. So I think that's, from the outside, it probably looks like chaos, but from the inside, because I've got the system and how I work things and how I communicate and the time frames that I need to operate around, it's just like your mind's constantly busy, but you don't really think about like it's just what you do. It's just another day of doing updates. The only difference is when you're at the shows, you just have the ability to see them in person instead of communicating with them on WhatsApp. And obviously if you're away, then you've got like time zones to manage and stuff like that. But sometimes that works in your favor because like I always find if I'm ahead of the GMT time zone, then I'm even more efficient because I'm waking up like 2 hours before everyone else gets up or whatever it might be. If it's in America, it becomes a lot more challenging because you're 5 or 6 or 7 hours ahead. Dubai is always good. Canada was quite hard because of the time difference, but you just adapt and just work around it. But yeah, it's pretty chaotic the first couple of times you do it, but I've done it so many times now that I think we flew to like 27 different countries last year. So we've done it so many times now that it's just the norm.
Do you have any horror stories? Any like day of competition, like everything's gone, completely tits up? Like, has there been a time in a show day where even with what you can control, you're like, this is absolutely nuts. Like, what is anyone gonna? I'm out of like, there's nothing I can do. Like, this is insane.
Yeah, there's definitely been a couple of experiences. Well, I don't know if you ever spoke to H about this, but when Hader went on his 2021 pro card run, we did 6 shows that year, 5 shows, 6. Well, it was 5, but it should have been 6. And he was getting into, he got a third and then a second, and then he won twice but lost in the overall. And then this was in the midst of COVID as well. So you're operating on COVID passes, the swab tests, and you've got to get positive a certain amount of hours before a flight, whatever. So like all the rigmarole of trying to manage that, different borders that needed different documents. You've got to get your NHS pass. And we basically book a flight to Norway. This is the 5th show we've done. So we're pretty much not at home for 5 weeks in a row because you're just traveling to different places in Europe, like on the chart. We went to Spain, went to Finland, we went to Denmark, went to Norway, just all over. And we get to the UK airport, and I think the flight is delayed for like 2 hours. It's like, right, okay. So now Hayder's like out of sync by 2 hours with his meal, so we've got to manage that. And then one of the passes that we have for COVID was the wrong date. So like they rejected the COVID pass. So we had to go and get another thing from the airport, come back with the right pass. Managed to get on the flight and then got to Norway. And then Norway rejected us at the customs. They didn't let us in the country because of this COVID pass. So they basically held us in custody for 2 hours as like a prisoner of war. Just policemen escorting us around the airport, wouldn't let us in. Hayder's like starved, ready for stage. So you can imagine Hayder hungry is not an individual you want to upset in any way. So I'm trying to allow him not to be arrested by Norway customs. And obviously in the nature of bodybuilding and certain places in Europe, they're quite against certain things used in our sport. So we're also managing their ability to not search our bags at the same time in case they find certain things. So that's not a good thing. And then we missed the last flight back to the UK. So they're like, you're going to have to stay in the airport overnight. And then we ended up going from Norway to Paris, and then from Paris to the UK. And then I think 3 days later we flew to Denmark, and he won the pro card in Denmark. But yeah, that was one of the many interesting stories that you get. But like in those situations, it's like sometimes it gets so ridiculous that you've just got to laugh and just find a way to make it work.
Now, how do you is that like a coaching moment for you? Obviously having staff underneath you who don't have that experience, like running into, these types of roadblocks, like, because that also, I would imagine, if you're flying to Bulgaria and you're dealing with your 12 athletes, your Reno, your UK, all over the world, you also have 10 coaches, and by proxy, you have, X number of dozens and probably into the hundreds of clients that I'm sure there's a bat signal like that, when shit goes wrong. And like, if I'm working for you and, we have a client and I'm in, I'm trying to get into Morocco or whatever, and they hold me up at the border, I'm texting you first. Like the interpersonal, the inter-staff stuff. How do you manage? Because I feel like your whole job is just managing expectations, whether it's managing expectations of your clients directly, managing expectations of your coaches, managing expectations of your coaches' clients. Like how do you manage imparting that wisdom onto another coach as they experience some of the crazy shit that you've had to deal with?
I think you just learn really fast. Like I think most of the guys that are working within the business have experienced that level of pressure or exposure as athletes before they experience it as coaches. So they're a little bit more familiar with that when they come into the business, because they're like, all right, I've done that in the shoes of the athlete. I've been to those shows. I've turned pro, or I've won this, or whatever it might be. So they've already got like a certain level of exposure where it's like, once it happens, you take it on the chin and you're like, right, how am I going to get around this and work through it? So like, managing expectations is a big thing. Like managing your expectations of your own athletes in terms of how they'll succeed, manage the expectations of how your coaches are going to do on from a competitive standpoint, managing expectations of when an inquiry comes through our CRM, like the coach's ability to convert them, to take a consult call and convert them and get them on board, and then maintaining that client in a happy manner. Like there's a lot of that, but that's where the back end of the business and the core, like the spine of the business, is those individuals that help me with that managerial sides, like Zoe and Alex within the team, who's the team manager, and Ben. Like it's like if you had a sporting setup and you had a football team or a baseball team, whatever, you've got like physios, you've got S&C, you've got managers, you've got a guy that does the kit, you've got a guy that, you know, manages travel, you've got all these people that are just a cog in a wheel. And I think there's two sides of the coin here, and you wear two hats. You wear the coach's hat, and then sometimes you have to take that off and you wear the business hat. And I think from what we do, if you want to do that on a global scale successfully, and you know you want to do that with multiple people in it, you can't rely on you being every hat in the business. You've got to have people around you, like you said, that do the stuff that you don't necessarily want to do, or for most of the time do the stuff that you don't have time to do well. Like when we first started, I tried to think, oh, I don't have to pay a PA, I can just do it myself. But then once you get to a point, it's like me doing this myself limits my ability to do everything well or do what I'm supposed to do well. So I'd rather just outsource things and get people who are better in that and have more time to do it. And then everything starts to click.
Do you ever struggle managing your own expectations? Like clearly people clearly you who've grown the business to what it is, and with the standard that you've grown it with, which is always hard. Quality and scale usually run inversely to one another. And also like, you know, the caliber of athlete that you yourself work with, certainly your expectations of yourself need to be almost unachievable because there's no other way to achieve what you've achieved. Is it difficult sometimes being like, you know, with not really having the time, it seems, to kind of be retrospective or introspective and being like, okay, man, we're doing good. Like we don't need 15 coaches by June, or, you know, are you ever like disappointed in where you're at? Like, I feel like people who get to your level are oftentimes everyone looks at them and goes, oh dude, like unreal. And you're like, yeah, nah, man, like this is whatever. Like you must have an air of like deprecation, or how is it that you manage your own expectations?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Like that's something that's really, really true in regards to people will probably see it from an out like a upcoming coach will probably see it from an outside perspective and be like, oh, when I get there, I'm sweet. Like I can just be present. I can enjoy it. I've got this far. But when you're actually in that position, you've got a glimpse of a little bit of success, or you've won, you know, a few things, and you've had, right, last year, for example, like we won 13 pro cards. We had 4 people at the Olympia. Like we had the best competitive results in the UK. Like we were the leading coaching team doing this. Like I don't know anyone that's won 13 pro cards in 1 year from the UK ever. And it's like all this stuff. It's like, right, well, that's fantastic. And I remember last year, the only time I actually enjoyed that was one day, and it was New Year's Eve when the year was fully done. And I was like, we've done pretty well, because I wrote a post on Instagram with everything we'd done for the year, and it's like, that's pretty good. And I didn't think I'd be able to do that, 5-10 years ago, whatever it might be. But then the day January 1st starts, all you think now is, well, the only way I can be happy this year is if I beat that. And then it just becomes this rigmarole of expectations being so high that even if you get a client that comes second at a big show, you're still walking away with the thought of, I've just lost. So like, it's all good and well having, seeing it from the outside and being like, oh, if I can get there, I'll be so happy. But once you're in those shoes, all you want to do is keep on doing it at a higher standard, or keep on winning, or keep on retaining those titles. So it would be like if you had, like, I don't know if you watch football, but like Man City last year won the treble. They won FA Cup, Premiership, and Champions League. Well, Pep Guardiola is going to be sitting at home thinking, the only way that I can be happy with the outcome of this year is if I win the treble again. And obviously that is, objectively, that's an extremely hard thing to do consistently. But once you've had a little glimpse of it and you've set those expectations for yourself, you can only really accept that again as being a success, if that makes sense.